Feel like mine is a little big. What's going on, everybody?
Hey.
Welcome back for another round of questioning constructs. We are here today, finally.
Yeah.
This has been a couple of weeks in the making.
No, a couple of months, John.
It
We've been trying
honestly,
to do
yeah,
this since
actually,
like beginning of
it,
February.
that's true. I mean, that means it has been a month. Yeah, a good 4 weeks in between. So,
5 weeks. We're in like the second month of
that's true.
March
That's
now.
true. But we are back. We
Mhm.
had a little bit of our lives have been a little tumultuous uh, the last couple of ever, and we we're adjusting. We're adjusting to the
Mhm.
roller coaster, the ride. For those of you who don't know, for those of you new to all of this, I'm John, and this is
I'm Rebecca. Nice to meet you guys and welcome. Always glad to have you here.
always glad to have you here. So I know you had something that you wanted to ask about or throw out there. Shoot.
hmm So I figured to ease this back in. This is more like a topic to continue a topic of conversation that John and I were having. So we had started talking about gentrification. And so one of the things that I've actually learned from John is look up words. And John will do it for me. He's always like, what's the definition of this word? And a lot of times I'm like, oh, like we know what the definition is. But honestly, sometimes, you'll be so proud of me, John. So I was having a moment last night and I was thinking, I had a moment where I was like, man, I was like, I'm feeling like really crappy about myself, but like not about me as a person. Like, I think when I was younger, I really struggled with value and like feeling my value. And now I'm like, man, I have value. Why aren't people like responding to the value or recognizing my value? Or I just feel, um, there's places in life where I feel like I'm just in this bubble, right? Where like there's nobody there and like no one knows that I'm here. And I'm just like, oh, like what's the point? And you'll be so proud of me. And I'll say this too. So I was doing an emotional coding session. So let me just quick aside for those who don't know what emotional coding is. So emotional coding is a way to release emotions, very similar to Reiki. I haven't looked a lot into the science behind it, but it uses your meridian line instead of using just the energy centers of the body. And so, oh no, are you still there?
I'm still there. Sorry about that.
I saw your face like, oh no. And I was
Yeah,
like, oh man.
everything blinked out of existence for a second. I'm like one of those kids with the lack of understanding of when things move past your vision. They're no longer there. Yeah.
So, so it's similar to Reiki. You're releasing emotions through energetic processing. And so there's a chart. Look up emotional code chart. It's there. There's two columns, column A and B, and then rows 1 through 6. And so you can do something called muscle testing. Everyone can do this. It's where you talk to your subconscious or your higher self. There are ways to do it. There's the sway test. You can use like linking of the hands. Some people do like finger testing. So look that up if you're interested, or we can get into it afterwards. But essentially, you're asking yourself questions to figure out what you need to clear from yourself. So you can column A or B. Oh, B. Okay, is it in even or odd rows? Oh, it's an even. Is it in 2, 4, or 6? And so I got 6. And so then once you know the column and the row, you start with the box, and each box has like 6 feelings or emotions in it. And so let me see if I can actually pull up what's in box 6. Oh, here we go. Box 6, and each of the rows is associated with a part of the body. So row 6 is associated with your glands and sexual organs. Which is so interesting. Like once you start thinking about this, like my throat, I was having issues with my throat, but the emotions are either pride, shame, shock, unworthiness, or worthlessness. So then you go through the emotions and you say, am I feeling pride, or do I need to clear pride, shame, shock, unworthy, or worthlessness? And I landed on worthlessness. And so, how this ties into looking up definitions, I was sitting there and I'm like, yeah, I don't understand because I don't feel worthless. Like, I'm really valuable and I don't question my value anymore. I'm just frustrated that like other people, like I feel like something isn't adding up. Like external life isn't validating what I already feel inside. And so I sat there and I'm like, I'm going to look at the definition. And my next thought was, John would be so proud. And so I looked at the definition of worthlessness. And I think you're going to find this really interesting. Here we go. So, oh no, see if I can go back. Ah, all right, hold on. I'll just look it up again. So, definition of worthlessness. And so, the reason why I say this is a continuation of the conversation that John and I were having about gentrification is we have these ideas of definitions in our head, and they're probably accurate, but then we miss like certain details. And this is one of those definitions that like really started to bring to light a few things for me. So worthlessness in its simple form means the state of being lacking in value, importance, or usefulness. And in my head, whenever I hear worthlessness, I'm like, oh, that lacks value. It's worthless. And so I don't associate it a lot with importance or usefulness. And so I sat there and I was like, that's it. Like, I don't feel important. Like if I was to poof out of existence, like no one would even know. Like that's how I was feeling last night. And so I was like reading through different things like something has no worth, merit, or value, useless, valueless, insignificant. And I was like, oh, okay, that's the word that I actually feel. I feel insignificant. But how interesting, if I hadn't looked at the definition, I wouldn't know that insignificant, when I feel that, it's actually tied to worthlessness. Um, and so that was really an important thing for me to realize. Other words like pointless, ineffectual, unimportant. So that was the first thing that I kind of sat there and I digested. I was like, wow, okay. So for me, worthlessness, even though I wasn't mentally associating with it, means that I feel unimportant and not so much that I feel like I don't lack value. And so then I asked ChatGPT, I was like, all right, what's the next step in this? So I asked ChatGPT, I said, what would you say is the root cause of cause if someone truly believes that they have high value but feel worthless in the moment? Worthless as in unimportant and people don't see their value or they aren't honored for their value. And this is what ChatGPT told me. Oh, I felt so called out. It said, I'd say the root cause is likely a disconnect between internal self worth and external validation. They know they're valuable at their core, but their environment, circumstances, or relationships aren't reflecting that back to them in the moment. This gap creates emotional friction, like, I know I'm worth more, so why isn't the world treating me accordingly? It could stem from past experiences where their worth wasn't acknowledged, societal conditioning that ties value to external recognition, or even exhaustion from constantly proving themselves. Sometimes it's about being in the wrong spaces or around the wrong people who can't perceive or appreciate their depth. The key isn't providing worth, but rather staying grounded in it, even when others don't see it. It's about shifting from why don't they see me to I see me and that's enough. And over time, aligning with people and spaces that do recognizing it. So I said, how do you stay grounded in worth? Staying grounded in your worth means anchoring yourself into something deeper than external validation. It's about embodying your value no matter how the world responds. And then it gave you like a couple different ways to do that. But I thought that was the whole thing was just so interesting to me from looking up the definition and, thinking of you and being like, John would be so proud of.
I am actually. I am very proud of that.
Yeah.
I think in general, and you and I have had conversations about it before, but I feel like oftentimes there's a disconnect between when people are speaking and what they are trying to communicate. A lot of times we use words that we all feel as though they are common. And I say common in a way of understanding. so common parlance, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a general understanding of what sad is, but do we really know when somebody says I'm sad what feelings they are feeling? Um, because think about what sadness holds, entails, what feelings are wrapped up in sadness in it of itself. Um, Same deal with words like happy, right? Is happy excited? Is
Mm-hmm.
happy ecstatic? Is happy joyful? Is
Mm-hmm.
happy? There's so many different words, but like we all kind of hang on to this common understanding. The problem is in conversation, not only with other people, but conversations with ourselves. We can have a tendency to use these words and not truly understand what they mean. So, really, really good example of that was when we were having that conversation. I love how you started this whole talk with the idea of gentrification. Gentrification is a word that I thought I had a firm understanding of. You had an understanding to a degree of, and we were both trying to meet in the middle.
Yeah.
And so yesterday, or not yesterday, was it
A
yesterday?
few days ago.
A few days ago,
Sunday.
we we
Sunday.
we had a conversation where basically we kind of explored what it meant, and I kind of gave a definition that again I came through with a lot of confidence in, and I was like, you know what? Let me just go ahead and look up what the actual definition is, which was really interesting because we found that the way I was using the word was very, very heavily coded in a negative way.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not necessarily that. But like, even me, who values language and the worth of words so much, can very easily make that mistake. So it's important
Mm-hmm.
to go ahead and look up these words. It's very interesting that you decided to do that and that I kind of led you down that path.
You
But
know,
go
oh,
ahead.
go ahead. Actually, it was our conversation. It actually, but when you suggested looking up gentrification, I was all just about to be like, hey, we should look it up because in the past, when I think we've looked up words, I think it was more about our interpretation, our personal interpretations, but we had the similar baseline, but it like we were just coming from two different directions. And over time, you and I have identified that we think very similarly, but it's that underlying like which direction are we coming from, and
The
we'll
trains
be able,
are leading towards the same
yeah,
station, but they're on different tracks. But
exactly,
they're going to the same station.
exactly,
Yeah.
yeah. But this was, I think, one of the maybe I don't know if it's the only time, but one of the more recent few times where both you and I were forming conceptions or talking about our experiences, and I couldn't tell you with certainty. Like I was like certain about my understanding, but I wasn't like confident. Like if someone's like, "Are you going to die on that hill?" I would have been like, "No, let's look up the word." So when you suggested looking it up, and the definition was very much more neutral, or like, um, just an area taking over in general due to like economic circumstances, you and I are also both very much on the same page of or it having more negative connotation, which it is negative anyways, but just there's some ways where I think it could be also very charged. And then
It's a very charged word.
yeah.
Gentrification is probably going to have a negative response when you
Hmm.
use it in a conversation. But the true idea of gentrification is quite literally the idea. And this, you know what, I say quite literally, but let me rephrase, because I believe one of the things that we read when we were kind of looking at the definition was that this is not 100% agreed upon across the board. But
Yeah.
the general consensus is when there is a demographic that has a change due to the due to the, I don't want to say income, but the,
I just said
yeah,
economic,
the
like,
economic, due to the increase in economic value,
mhm,
a specific demographic is
marginally
affected.
marginalized,
Yeah, the
marginalized demographic.
character of a neighborhood
Yeah.
changes due to
Mhm.
economic changes and forces. That's
Mhm.
gentrification,
Yeah.
usually,
Yeah.
upward. And so a lot of times it kind of, we don't need to get into like the ins and outs of gentrification, but like it does, it's really interesting because that was one where I was coming with that like 80%, 85%
Mhm.
confidence, right? Like I
Mhm.
felt pretty firm in what I was saying, which I'm glad you know, glad even though, confident, I was willing to go ahead and
Mhm.
look it up regardless because it was
Mhm.
surprising, and worthwhile
Mhm.
to understand. And it led to a deeper conversation at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And that's, what, this kind of plays back to a previous conversation we had where, we had said looking up information on a given thing and not just taking a headline at face value, a
Mhm.
lot of times is going to end up in you finding more questions to ask
Mhm.
about the thing that you're looking at, and probably lead to more interesting questions as well,
Yeah.
which is what
I
we're all about here at Questioning Constructs.
Mhm. And I think to your point on that too, like by the end of our conversation, we had way more questions that we didn't have answers to that I think I don't know who was the first to say it, but I brought up like I would love to talk to someone who's an economic
Yeah,
or economist. I think that's how you say
economists.
economist or someone who like specializes in this to understand their perspective because I feel like after like again, same as you, I was fairly confident in my understanding, not so much if I had to define the word specifically, but then when we looked it up and started talking about it, I'm like, okay, I don't really know. I would love to talk to an expert to get more clarification as to like what the industry says about this, their industry, because there's so many situations like you brought up. We were talking about different life experiences and one of the ones that I can give. So in my hometown, very much one type of population, but my hometown is has grown to the point where it is so hard to, make ends meet for a variety of people. And so one of the things that you brought up that I've never really considered, you said, well, what's the displaced population? And you said farmers. And I was like, that's actually really true because where I live used to be just four major farms 25 years ago. Um, and so when my family moved into the area, there were still probably two or three at that point, but now it's like all houses and all built up and all like,
A classic, it was a classic example of gentrification that we couldn't
yeah,
necessarily classify as like inherently negative, but
right.
it was gentrification,
Right.
right?
And it's one you wouldn't normally think of too. And so I sat there and I was like, I've never like you see it, you're involved in it, you see, what's happening to all the farmers, but you just don't really put those two in your minds. And so it really opened my eyes of how much more am I missing if I'm not like doing more research. And so that's why I think last night it really stuck out to me because that was I sat there and I was like, I feel like I'm missing something because worthless to me had a specific definition. Worthless equaled no value. And I'm like, I know I'm not struggling with that. And so like like if that's coming up, what else is there? And when I really started reading the definition and saw that unimportant was in there, I was like, wow. I was like, I resonate with that one. And then just thinking about how I relate to people, I don't necessarily have a problem with like people pleasing, but I do like having a positive impact. And I do like having a place like some sort of importance. And so I think I really struggle with what do I do with myself when I'm not providing value in people's lives. Like I don't think I need to be giving all the time, but I do like positively impacting people. So that was something I sat there last night and I was like, okay, I have the starting place, right? Awareness is a great starting grounds for you to build your base off of. And so now that I understand that, like, oh, maybe when I feel like there's this big bubble and like nothing's going on and I don't know what to do with myself, I know now that that emotion is unimportance. And now I can start asking better questions. But had I not looked it up, I would have just sat there, I think, a little frustrated and just been like, this doesn't make sense. It's probably not accurate. Um, but same with, something that stood out with what you were saying, John. Um, how do we know when what someone really means when they say sad or happy? There's the emotions wheel, I think is what it's called, where it's that big pie chart and has like, oh, here are the emotions that fall under anger, happy, sad. And so if
Bro,
someone
I'm
is
gonna
a
have that for my kid. If ever I have kids,
literally,
1000% there's gonna be
yes,
that in a room with a
yes,
little thing to point at, and we're gonna get
yes,
through it.
yes. So I had a session with my somatic therapy, which somatic therapy is, again, for someone who doesn't know, it's all about the body. And I had this one moment where she asked me, she's like, how does your body feel? And I was like, oh, I felt shame. And then I immediately felt like disgust. And I asked her, I was like, I mean, I felt shame for a split second, but then it just immediately turned into disgust. And so she told me, she's like, when you aren't given the chance to work through things or the proper environments, your wires get crossed. So it's kind of similar to when someone's like, oh, you should be happy you're doing something fun. And the person's like, I'm not, I just feel sad. Like your wires are crossed. And so in order for your body to actually give you the proper signals, you have to actually work through that and like uncross the wires. But it just made me think how close like some of these emotions are. Like shame and guilt are
Super
like
linked, super
super
linked.
linked.
Yeah,
And
and
it
and
probably
a lot of
Mhm.
times it's they're so linked that in shame you'll find things like wrapped up that like you would
Mhm.
never guess. Like why do shame and guilt go hand in hand a lot of times? But then like maybe it's only like a small piece of it is guilt, right?
Mhm.
And maybe a small piece or a large piece is disgust. Maybe a small piece or a large piece
Mhm.
is frustration, right?
Mhm.
Like frustration and shame. Like would you ever like consciously say those two feelings are overlapped? But I know for sure that I've been very frustrated and ashamed of
Mhm.
myself.
Mhm.
And yeah, yeah, real interesting.
Something, oh, you just made me think of. So I saw something on Facebook. I don't know if it's the guy from Key and Peele, or somebody similar to him, like in that genre, right? There's somebody that got into entertainment and but they were originally going to school to study science. And the one thing that they disagreed, or like engineering or something, and the one thing they disagreed on was the periodic table. They said that the periodic table, instead of the blocks, and I'm sure there's pictures if you look this up, should be like more like a wave based on, don't come after me for this, but based on, I think, like the carrier, and then like branches off of like the different periodic components. And so it really made this wave. What if the emotions wheel actually, we know someone who did research into this. Jake Abu Hamada was, look him up. He actually has a TED talk, but he did a lot of research into this, into psychology, where he's advocating that branches of psychology, different things that you experience, like bipolar, depression, I don't know, schizophrenia, or like autism, anything that you experience is actually in a in like a circle, and they lie on different points based on, I forget what his metrics and grid are. It was a fascinating talk, but depending on where you skew is like where you will lie on the grid. So everything's more interrelated versus just these separate, like, oh, you have like, I think we've gotten to the point where it's like anger, you have these emotions under anger. But what if that's also supposed to be more of a circle and will show the interrelatedness of the emotions? And if we're able to map that out, how much better can we help people in therapy, or just people can help themselves by uncrossing those wires? They lie so close together sometimes.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting, like how our emotions kind of like play on on themselves. Um, yeah, one of the things that kind of came up, you may have noticed I've been like clicking a little bit back here.
Mm-hmm.
Um, when you had initially, spoken about worthlessness and looking up the definition, and then you kind of came to uh,
Unimportant.
yeah, importance,
Mm-hmm.
right? So here's a question: do you tie value and importance together?
Ooh, my immediate answer is no.
Okay,
Wow, I need to really think about that.
because my initial, so you had made the mention, and then my initial thought was, well, if you're feeling unimportant, how do you build value in yourself? Like, how do you build value? And then I found an article the article is called 26 No Nonsense Ways to Truly Value Yourself. And as I was reading through it, I was realizing that it didn't quite hit
Mm-hmm.
the thing that it felt like we were talking about. And so
Mm-hmm.
I brought the question to mind, well, is it that is value and importance like they're both similar concepts, but would we say that they're the same thing? And I don't think we would. um
Which is interesting because how can you like the correct answer I would say is yes, because how can you have importance if it's not valuable?
the initial response
But
is yes, right? But like when you further think about it, so like let me just run through the ways. Now I'm gonna
yeah.
warn you, we don't intend for this to be like corny. So like
Oh
I know
no.
like listen, we're not, as much as I love, sometimes unfortunately part of like the whole idea of therapy, or like the idea of like self-love and self-care does come across as real corny sometimes. It as
I think the way it's sold is
sometimes it is
really
real corny. So forgive us ahead of time. All right. But I'm gonna run through what this article says. And this article is from A Conscious Rethink. That's the website I'm getting this off of, aconsciousrethink.com.
hmm.
Okay, so
Sounds like ChatGPT created the website.
it kind of does. This is, it seems a little sketchy, but one, trust yourself in the decisions you make. Not bad advice, right? Two,
Mm-hmm.
stop settling. Not bad advice. The biggest problem is a lot of this feels generic to me.
I
Um,
agree. Also, I just want to say a quick aside for not settling. I heard someone phrase this a couple weeks ago, and it's kind of changed my perspective ever since. At any given moment, you are accepting the minimum that you think you deserve in all areas of your life. This is the minimum that you are willing to tolerate. And I sat there and I was like, wow. I was like, that's a way different way of looking at it that I've never looked at it before. And it's, for me, it's very true.
I'm gonna have to think about that one. I'm definitely gonna have to give that one some thought. The
Mhm.
minimum at any given time.
Because think about it. The reason why I believe in the truth of it is if you truly don't like something, what do you do? I'm done. I'm over this. I'm not accepting this. No. Goodbye. Like,
Hmm. The minimum
hmm
you're willing to accept, assuming that like when you make that change, you've hit the maximum you're willing to accept. So whatever you're
I don't think
doing
it's
now.
I don't think it's the I don't view it as the maximum. I just view it as closer to what you wanted.
Oh,
So I feel like it's kind of like speed limits, right? So let's just pretend that, everyone ignores the speed limit that's posted anyways, right? They usually go faster,
Yeah,
but there is a minimum speed limit that you're like, oh yeah, on the highway, I'm like, you might be under, but there's a certain point where you're like, oh yeah, this is unsafe. I'm not going any lower.
yeah, I can see that. Okay, I can imagine it that way.
Mm-hmm.
Three, identify those people who try to tear you down. Also, solid advice. Be honest with yourself. Very, very solid and underappreciated advice. Stop comparing yourself to others. Man, that's a big one. That's a big one. Stop comparing yourself to other. I don't know how I feel about this one. Silence your inner critic.
I don't
Um,
think you. I don't think that's possible. I think it's more befriending and
hmm.
and giving your inner critic what it needs, love and space and acknowledgement, but also what I've noticed. Let me just give an example that I've actually seen an output for. So, I'm big on gratitudes and affirmations. Do it every day. And so, one of my new ones that I really, really like, and it feels so good to say every single time, and I resonate with, is I'm a person that everything works out for easily and effortlessly. So, I experienced a nail in my tire, and instead of me getting stressed and like frustrated and feeling like I'm inconvenienced, immediately my brain was like, oh well, I'm a person that everything works out for easily and effortlessly. Now, why I bring up that situation is because your words are so powerful, and it's what you repeat to yourself that then becomes automatic. And I've repeated that one enough times to myself that my brain, that was the first thing when it went, what's our response, was to pull that for automatically for me. It wasn't really like a conscious thought. Like it was just given to me. And so that was really exciting because I'm like, oh my gosh, like the amount that I've been repeating this to myself has actually now taken effect where my brain brings it forth automatically. So with the inner critic, I think it's really about acknowledging why you feel that way, why it's saying that way. It's still a part of you. And then telling it, like giving it other things to tell you. And I've had to really work on this because I had a really hard inner critic. And so now when things are like the things that it brings to me are less harsh or like,
So it's interesting how you phrase it,
mhm,
because I think we don't necessarily disagree on this. I
mhm,
think we both actually, for the most part, agree. I think we phrase it differently, though.
hmm,
So if you were to rewrite that sentence, it sounds like you would say befriend your inner critic. Is that correct?
mhm.
I think if I were to rewrite that sentence, it would be temper your inner critic. And
Interesting.
for me, the reason I say temper is because I think people have a misunderstanding of what your inner critic is, and they
Mm,
often confuse that with the demon on your shoulder, the thing that's telling you the worst things about yourself. I don't know. I think that thing is very critical.
hmm.
I don't know that that's your inner critic. Um,
Whoa.
I feel like those are two different things. They're coming from two different places. I feel like your inner critic um, is um, is almost like the how would I explain it? It's almost like the it's the it's that thing that says, "Hey, you could have done a little better on that one." I think
What would
that
you call that then? Like
I don't know. Like I think
like
because
a coach?
there's one that's full of vitriol for the self, right?
Okay.
Like and that I'm very familiar with. Like I've spent a
Hmm.
lot of time hating myself, hating myself.
But you
Um,
viewed as two different things.
I
So
think
like,
so, because I think
whoa.
like the thing is, the inner critic is almost like the seed of what that fiendish thing is, right? Which is why I say
Ah,
temper it, because it's
ah.
not necessarily that your inner critic is bad. I think, like anything, like any of your senses, right? Like your inner critic is guiding you towards a better self. It's just that for a lot of us, we've not been trained on how to manage what that looks like or
Mhm.
sounds like. And so what happens is, as a kid, and this is me just spitballing here, this is
Yeah,
coming off,
yeah.
I've never stopped to really think about this for any given amount of time. So this is me just talking right now. But what I imagine is that as kids growing up, right, one of the things that we can all recognize is that children are not really taught how to manage emotions well, at least not in
Mm.
the United States. I don't, I
Not in your
don't,
generation.
it's not something that we see. That emotional intelligence is not something that we see. And, or teaching emotional intelligence is not something that we see. And I think the assumption is that you don't really get any emotional intelligence until after high school, which I disagree with. But I have no idea. I'm not a researcher.
Hmm.
Um, what I would say is, what starts off as that as a child, the thing that says, "Oh, I like this. Oh, I didn't like this,"
Hmm.
right? Then becomes, "Oh, that hurt," and then that becomes, "Oh, I'm dumb for that." And then it
Mm.
becomes, "Oh, why did I do this again?" And then it becomes, "Why do I keep making the same mistake? Why do I look like this? Why do I feel like this?" And like,
Hmm.
if you were to distill those kind of ideas down, is there a
Mm.
seed of truth that can be taken? Probably.
Hmm.
Maybe I should do things a little differently. Maybe I should really take some, personal pride in how I am. These are complex thoughts, which is why, I imagine it's tough for kids, but like, or maybe that's why it's not taught to kids. Maybe it's because these are complex thoughts, and like trying to work through those ideas is a very complex thing. But I think if I were to look at the times that I'm the worst to myself, um, I would say that that's not just me being like critical, although
Hmm.
there's a critique in there.
So
So,
let me. Oh, keep going.
I would just tone that down. And to be honest, you've seen me practice this actually. What
Hmm.
I've now done is, on the days that I'm like doing really, really bad, like really, really rough, I started putting into practice just calling somebody I love and saying, "Hey, I'm having a really bad day. I just need you to tell me something good about me.
Hmm.
I really just need you to like tell me something that you like about me." Just, which sounds almost like, when you kind of hear it on the surface, it sounds like um, self-important. But when you examine it, you're at your lowest point, and you're looking to reach out for anybody to pull you out of the
Hmm.
tornado, pull you from that tornado that's sucking you in. And so, who better than to go to the people who love you, who have that outside view, and who are able to say, "This is what I cherish about you." And then it's on you to take a second to reflect on that, bring yourself above water, and then you can
Hmm.
think about what it was you were being critical about. So, like in my case, I struggle a lot with being loved and being alone. Right? You and I have had extensive conversations about that. So, what I might do is I might call my mom, and I'll say,
Hmm.
"Hey, I just need you to tell me something." And she usually says something. This has only happened twice, so it's not even a usual thing. But she'll say something that makes me stop and think. And usually these are at moments where I'm like, nobody fucking loves me. I don't love me.
Hmm.
Nobody could ever love me. right? But that one thing of like, oh, I never considered this about myself. Like, you know what? You notice that? Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's the water in the face. It's the slap.
Yeah.
You know, it pops you out of your mode, right?
Gives your brain
And it
something else
gives
to think
you
about. New
and
problem.
really what you're looking for, in my opinion, right? Because this is all
Mm-hmm.
just my opinion. What you're looking for is not like a solve all problems moment. What you're
Mm-hmm.
looking for is an opportunity to take a breath. What you're
Mm-hmm.
looking for is somebody to pull you up just high enough that you can take 3 deep breaths and change what's going on in your head.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now, I have some questions for you.
Sure.
And I think the second one's going to be real interesting. But first question, if you believe that they're separate, and actually let me start with this one question. Do you have an inner voice? Not what we're considering as the critiquer or anything like that, but
Like the
you
inner
know,
monologue.
um yeah.
Um,
Or like not you talking to yourself, but do you have like the tiny voice of reason, or the tiny voice, like the what's another word for it? Like intuition?
intuition.
But like a lot of
Um,
times I there's like a tiny voice for me. Do you have that?
um,
Not all the time with that's why I said it's not it has to go with intuition, but it's I almost view the tiny voice as like my truest self, or like kid me who like always is like pure and like knows what it wants, right?
let me ask, is it in your voice?
No.
That's
So
interesting.
okay, well okay. So whether or not you have it, my next question was going to be, do your voices feel and sound different? So for me, I have one more question after this too. For me, I have what I call like the voice of intuition, or like the knowing, or like my little voice or whatever. That just sounds kind of like this, and it's always in a whisper, but like it's there. And like sometimes it comes in moments with intuition, and sometimes it's like trying to talk, and it has this feeling of like small white like seed, like like lighter. And then my critiquer also feels like me, but has like a darker voice, and it's more like denser energy. But again, both of those are different than when I'm speaking to myself in my head, because when I speak to myself in my head, it sounds like me, but the other two voices don't. And so that's why I thought it was so interesting when you were saying that the critiquer almost has like two parts. There's the critic, and then there's the
The
someone.
vitriol. Yeah.
Yeah. And so for you, do they feel, sound, maybe even look different?
So weird. Such a weird idea. And I
And I
say
have one more
weird
question.
not as like a
Oh yeah.
critical thing. I say weird as in like conceptually I just haven't really given it much thought. Um, so when I say that they're two different things, one
Hmm.
thing I want to clarify is that, and you kind of got to it when you were posing your question, is that for me it's very much two in one, right? Like
Mm.
they are both the quote unquote critic. It's separating the two things though, because there's a piece of vitriol that is not the critic.
Mm.
It is vitriol. It
Yeah.
is self disgust.
Uh-huh.
And self disgust, while it capitalizes on what the critic does, right? But the critic, in it of itself, is like gentrification in it of itself. It's a neutral thing, right?
Hmm.
The critic is just providing insight, like you said,
Hmm.
and then now depending on where I'm at in life is
Hmm.
whether or not the self disgust and vitriol takes over. If I'm having a bad day, the critic says something along the lines of, now, if you took care of that a couple of days ago, we wouldn't be in this mess.
Mm-hmm.
And then the self disgust and vitriol says, look at you fucking up again. Look at look at you knew you were gonna be here. You set this up. You did
Mm-hmm.
this to yourself, right? And listen to how
Yeah.
similarly those two things
Yeah.
sound. In both scenarios, I'm saying that I did it to myself, right? But
Yeah.
like the approach is way different, right? And
So,
so
mhm.
in my head, I wouldn't necessarily say that they're different. If I were to like categorize the voices,
You're taking off the harshness. Yeah.
and that's
So,
what I would say in terms of like the 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 what they sound like. They probably sound like volume.
mm-hmm.
The when the critic is amplified by self doubt, disgust, self loathing, right? There's a megaphone, and it gets amplified, and then the words are harsher. They're more sharp. They're daggers that are meant to dig in, but they're not meant to just strike anything. They're meant to be precision.
Constructive.
They're meant to be precision tools. They're meant to hit
Mm-hmm.
their bullseye and every bullseye behind that and strike where it hurts the most. That's
Mm-hmm.
what the self-loathing and disgust does, right? But it sounds all, to be honest, like me.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
all of those
That's your
voices sound
internal
like
voice.
me. And like I don't know that I can conceptually say that I hear them, but if
Uh,
I, because I don't know, maybe I'm just not
that's
aware enough to
so.
be able to say it, but I cannot say 100% that I hear it like that as much as I feel it.
Uh-huh.
Um, but if I were to hear it, what I would say is, if I try to conjure a voice in my head, um, the voice often in my mind, right, would
Mm-hmm.
sound like the true tenor of my voice without the
Mm.
shakiness,
Mm-hmm.
without anything
Your
like
your
whatever that true like
your
the
higher
note,
self.
whatever like note that you would play on a
Uh-huh.
piano that
Yeah.
hits the sound my voice makes. That's the sound that I talk in my head.
Uh-huh.
Without all the extra, put-ons,
Yeah.
without everything that comes with being a person. It's just that note. And that's what I would say like that voice sounds like. If I imagine it, and again, I can't even speak to whether or not that's like a legitimate thing,
No,
So
that
it's
that makes sense.
like
Um,
I feel it more than I hear. But
Interesting, because I get both, but also one of my gift sets is I receive messages or like hear other things. And so I don't, but I do have another question, but let me explain what it's like for me. So I have two. It's like the little voice, the inner knowing, they're like just like whispers. And then I have the inner critic, which is also a part of me, but I kind of view it more as like if you guys have heard of like your shadow self or like the self that's like very critical or is coming forward with the parts that you haven't accepted with yourself. And the I've tried like when you said kind of like peeling back and managing, I've tried that but it doesn't work for me. So what I have found works, and it's this is going to lead into my last question. What I found works is I give it space and I don't try and like control what it's saying anymore, but I almost just recognize and accept that like the harsher responses are because it had a harsher response to it, and I'm almost like reparenting the voice. And sometimes I'll even say to it, like if it's like really harsh, I say, "Hey, I hear you. We're not going to talk to ourselves that way. but like here's something that you could say instead, or like I'll have a conversation with it sometimes, and over time it's gotten less critical. But I found that when I was trying to take away from it, or when I was trying to manage it, that resulted in it just getting louder and angrier and like feeling even worse. And so it's interesting though when you think about it, because the times, it's almost like it's sometimes like an overseer. So it'll be like, oh, like you shouldn't do that. But when I beat myself up, it's in my voice. And so I've had to like really stop that. And then I think that other piece that really is like the inner critic has gotten softer, because it's not so I do kind of agree with you that it almost seems like there's two layers. One is like just yourself against yourself, and the other is like it's been ramped up too much, and it's just stuck in that, like it's like someone having a panic attack. You kind of like you're stuck in the anxiety until your body goes, oh, like I can't do this anymore. um and so it's kind of the same thing. But I'm going to ask you a question, because what got me thinking about this last question was how you said more on the managing side of it, like toning it down, versus I'm almost like reparenting and allowing it to still exist. I wouldn't say that it's necessarily gotten um more like pinpoint accurate. It's just gotten softer in what it says. So maybe I'm not there yet, but I want to ask you, do you think that each person has a completely different setup? So we hear a lot about like
That's a
we
good
hear
question.
we hear a lot about, there's kind of two parts to that. So we hear a lot about people like they talk to themselves in their head, right? And so I think there's an assumption that that is, everyone has, aside from the people who don't have that, like has been scientifically proven that there are people who don't. For the people that do, we think that we have a conceptual understanding of what that is because everyone experiences it. But for the inner critics, what if that is completely self-developed? Because it also seems like, based on how you and I grew up, anything I do to like manage, because I was so managed and my life was so managed, and that was so restricting. I'm learning a lot about myself this year, that any type of it's when any type of restriction comes in, that's when my body starts going, no restriction. We know what that is. It's not good, and it like overreacts. So I've learned with my voice, I'm like, all right, I'm going to give you all the space, but like I'm going to start working with you, because we're not like, there are rules, but I'm going to allow you to get comfortable with the rules and have the time that you didn't have and I didn't have growing up. So I don't even know if the concept of inner voices at this point, because you really just made me think about something so new, or think about it in a different way. I don't even know if the concept of inner voices, is that something that every person like self develops within their own ecosystem, or is it similar to like when we talk to ourselves in our head and it's just environmentally influenced? I'll let you chew on that.
Um, so this is obviously not something that either one of us can answer, right? But
We need to ask more people.
it's
I'd love to have more
here's
data points on that.
here's why I think personally that this is an interesting question. Um, uh, because it has potential to be like it feels like it has potential to be like the idea of like I don't know aphantasia, for example,
Mm,
right? Where it's like and you can right you can conjure an image in your head if you close your eyes. You can bring up an image of a red apple, right? If I ask you to close your eyes and imagine a red apple, you can make one appear in your head. I cannot. I have no ability to do so. I don't have like there's no base forming of a picture. Like when I imagine in concepts. I
mm-hmm.
cannot bring a actual image of it. I can't. Daydreaming is not. it's different for me. Daydreaming happens differently for me, right? So I wonder if it's kind of like that, where it's
Mm.
like there is like you know a subset of people that kind of form systems in a certain way, because I don't think we're all so individual that it is completely different, right? And I don't think that it's all environmental, right? I wonder if this is something that is kind of a little bit of both environmental
Ooh.
and natural setup. Like if you are predispositioned to be able to not only hear your own voice or hear a voice speak to you, right? Um, because there's also the difference between people who have a voice speaking through them, and
Mhm.
like me, like there's no conversation in my head. This is conscious thought just flowing. Like there's no,
Mhm.
unless I purposely set up a filter and like stop and slow down and say I am thinking about this now.
Mhm.
There, like it's not that the words that are coming out of my mouth right now are not formed before they come out of my mouth. So if you can form those words and you can bring up an image in your head and you can imagine in this specific way, what if your mind formulates these almost like building blocks in a specific way
Mhm.
that could probably be common amongst people who think in
Mhm.
that way, right?
Ooh.
Versus other, which is why I say some nurture, right? Because you get the initial
Mhm.
building blocks that say,
Yeah.
hey, you're probably going to think in A versus B, C, and D,
Mhm.
and then um, a nurture jumps in, right, and is like, hey, environment builds how you now interact with those building blocks that have a set pattern. I don't
Mhm.
know if any of that makes sense because it
No.
sounded like word spew to me.
No,
But
no. It made total sense. And I'm wondering if there's a correlation between this, like if it's going to be like a DSM-5 at some point when we find out that everything's way more related than we think. If you can almost like the Myers-Briggs, where like
dude,
personality test, where
years
it's
into
like,
the future when they're able to like distinguish that,
yeah.
man,
But you made me think because aphantasia, that's what it is, right?
yeah.
So aphantasia, um, for anyone who don't know, like you can't make pictures in your mind. But I did after you and I had made the one video. We do have another podcast video on it. If you think that that's really interesting, we do talk about that. What I found interesting about what you were saying, another theory could possibly be with aphantasia, you have different levels. So there, I came across a Reddit article. I think I sent it to you
Yeah,
with the Apple.
it's on a scale. Like my mom
Right.
can envision things a little bit. So
Yeah.
like I'm a little further on the scale than she is, but she's still definitely like she can't bring up a clear image of
Yeah.
anything.
Yeah. So I wonder if the inner critic or like the inner part, right, or parts, maybe that's on a sliding scale too, depending on how developed it gets. So it might be that we're talking about the same thing, and you and I are in totally different spots on the scale. And I don't know, which is necessarily closer in development or if there's even like an end to that scale. But it
Yeah,
could also be instead of people developing something kind of specific to them, it's more on a sliding scale. And depending on where you're at in your development or what happened with it, that it then determines like how
it may
you're
not
able to
even
interact with it.
it may not even be a scale either. It could be easily like a one of those circle charts where it's just like you
Mm.
throw a dart and it just describes this area of the circle chart.
I
Um,
could see it, but I'd also be slightly less likely to consider a circle because it's not like you. Well, I don't know. Do you
I mean,
jump?
like one of
Does it have
these.
any?
You know what
Oh,
I mean?
like the three,
Yeah,
the three
because
circles.
you have the people who are along the edge and it bends inward,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
which
Okay,
means
okay.
some people overlap and they have like, certain
Yeah.
effects. I
Okay.
wonder if it's something like that, and it may not even be two circles, it may be like five, right?
Five circles.
And
Okay.
then, you know what I mean? And then
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
like these traits, right? When these
Hmm.
traits happen to line up, there's potential for you to think in this kind of format. But that's when the line becomes the scale, right? Like
Hmm.
there's potential for you to fall into this overlap, but it doesn't mean you have to fall into this overlap. You know what I mean?
Hmm. Hmm.
And I have to wonder if like all of these and like how far it goes. Like what if like
Hmm.
there's a percentage of the population that can't make their ears rumble, right? Like that's a thing. Um, See, and I can make my ears rumble, right? So like what if that has
Like,
something?
actually, wait. I can like inner ears.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, okay.
Oh, okay,
So,
okay.
like how far does this go? And like
Right.
there is also like the question of the questions that haven't been asked yet. So we don't understand the differences. Like, I mean,
Huh.
a lot of well, some of these ideas have come into like play recently, and have like gotten a lot of like attention, right? Because it's like, how outlandish is it to think that not everybody hears a voice in their head,
Hmm.
right? But for me, I'm like, that's just something you get in stories, right? Like, but neither individual quite asked the question, and so
Hmm.
the conversation never gets had, and all of a sudden it's 2018 and a post blows up on social media, and everybody's like, you have half the world who's like, oh my god, you hear voices, are you okay?
Yeah.
And the other half of the world is like, how do you do anything without hearing a voice telling you what to do? Like, so it's just
It's like the
interesting.
um astigmatism where they
Mm.
had the post of the stoplights, and it was like
Oh
I was like 8
yeah,
years
yeah.
old when
That's
I
how I view
realized
the world. That's
yes, and I was like,
bro.
what?
Like right now, there are lines from the main light source here that like are
Yes,
yeah, absolutely.
yes. I sat there and I was like, you mean that's not real? You mean that's just in my eyesight? Like I'm not seeing pretty lights everywhere, and is I wonder too if I really want to come across a Reddit post now, and if I do, I'm sending it to you. Like, I have three inner voices. Ask me anything, and like I wonder if
I've
like
stopped in on multiple personality ask me anythings, and those
oh
have been
those
interesting.
are really
Yeah.
interesting. Or I came across a video the other day that was like, come take a walk with me and see what my schizophrenia looks like, and it
Mm.
was all like this weird like faces were coming out, and I'm like, this is what it looks like. Wow, like
Crazy. Yeah.
I had no idea. Like it's crazy that we can actually like build that for increased
What
awareness now.
what's crazy is that um, reality is what you make it, right?
Mm.
And
Mm.
my father taught me the lesson of you know uh, reality is oh, see, now I'm forgetting the lesson.
Go back and
um,
relearn it.
I know, right? um, re-
Don't let him
Perception
hear
is
you say
reality.
that.
That's the lesson. My father grew up telling me
Mm.
perception is reality. And it's amazing how much truth
Mm-hmm.
there is to that, because maybe on a foundational level that is not true, right? Perception is
Mm-hmm.
very much not reality. But when it comes to society and interacting with people, perception absolutely is.
Mm-hmm.
If you run around with a one of those black ski masks, right, and you run
Yeah.
around with a hoodie on and you're holding a bag up in your hand and your hand is in the bag, you might not have anything. You
Mm-hmm.
might be going to the gas station to buy a soda, and it just
Mm-hmm.
happens to be a
Buy
bag in your
face
hand because you're
trash.
preparing. It might
Yeah.
be real cold outside, but you definitely are gonna, have a problem. You're definitely gonna have a problem, right? Perception is reality. So yeah,
Well, and
we live in all different types of realities. We kind of all construct our own that we each individually live in and then share.
that's what I was literally about to say. Each person has, when you're interacting with someone, you think you're having a shared experience, but each person is living in a totally separate reality, and you might have similarities. But that's why when you ask two people of an experience, they'll remember different things. Or, um, what is it? There's the study that people don't see colors the same. So
Yeah, yeah, I've
everyone
heard of
knows
that.
like what blue is. I'm not talking about people who are colorblind or um mix colors. But for people who, like, if you held up a blue crayon, everyone's like blue. But I'm gonna see a different shade of blue than you are, than the next person and the next person. And when I remember when I first read that, I was like, that is wild. Like I just, in my mind, we were all seeing the same blue because we recognize it as blue. And that's not the case. So then I started thinking like, well, how different is that then? Like, does someone just see a light blue every time the dark blue crayon comes up? Is it that much of a difference? Or is it like
Y-
slight shades? Like,
your brother during
oh my
that one game
God.
night. Yeah.
Oh my God. Bless
Um,
his heart. So my brother is a little colorblind, but he, like, if you put colors up next to each other, he can tell the difference. But
but
we were
they're
playing a
different
game,
shades.
yeah, Splendor, and he really,
The
he
coins. That's
he really
hilarious.
thought that he had the right color. And he was so excited. He's like, take that. And you have different colored coins. And he put it down, and we're all looking at it. And we're like, um,
What are you
Andrew,
trying to?
I was like, one of your coins is not like the others, literally. And he goes, no, they're all the same. And I was like, you think these are the same? And he's like, dang it. And we're just like, all right.
Yeah,
Sorry, man. We'll give it. I think we even maybe gave it to him because we felt
yeah.
so bad.
Different realities. Different
Different
realities. So
reality.
also just to like loop back to the start of our conversation.
Hmm.
This is why when you're having conversations and when you are talking with people, to understand the words that you're using, right? People have a
Yeah.
tendency to overstate their position by using words that they think they know what they mean.
Hmm.
Use words that you understand and that and if you don't know something, don't be afraid to say, let's just look this up and see what it means so that we have a baseline, right?
Hmm.
Because we
Yeah.
all live in different
Hmm.
realities. If you say, I'm ready, ready might mean two different things to two different people. I come up in a Hispanic family, so I know. Um,
Hmm.
so,
And to that point, ask more questions to confirm your understanding of their
yeah,
reality. You are like, I feel like a lot of times we think again because that people are sharing reality. Now, when I understand that there's a discrepancy, or when it's like, oh wait, like I thought we understood the same, but I don't ask just, oh, like you weren't going to take just 5 minutes. Like I was thinking that we were on the same page, that a quick shower was like 20 minutes, 20 minutes or less. Like you're going to quick in, out, and done. I don't just ask those questions. I also ask like, hey, like, what does being ready entail to you? Like, ask to understand where people are coming from so that way when you respond back, it's in a way that they understand within their reality. I tell my team this all the time, like, ask questions, understand where the person is at so you can tailor to make sure that you have more success in talking with them. And so that way, if you're able to do this successfully and put it in a way that they understand within their reality of their framework, then they're going to be able to they understand you far better. It's not like, ooh, let me make sure someone understands me. It's no, let me put it in a way that they understand in their reality so that the end result is they understand me. And I think the world can use more people asking questions.
I agree. I agree. All right. Let's wrap it up here. In terms of this discussion, I've got a question for everybody. Going through and looking at some of these other, we didn't get to all of them. Actually,
Oh my god, I totally forgot.
we got to, let's see, what number was it before we
Three.
ran, like we took off running. Six. Silence your inner critic. One of the 26 that also I strongly believe in, um, that I think people should employ more often, and will end up being my question here is, here we go. Go on a date with yourself.
Yeah.
I think that's something I recommend to people. Take yourself out. Like, go,
Mhm.
and it doesn't even have to be like something where you're spending money. Like, maybe you just need to go on a walk. Maybe you need to look up what the closest waterfall is,
The
and
tallest waterfall.
take a book and
Mm-hmm.
go. We're hitting summer out here in the States. It's that time to be outside and touch grass. You know, take yourself out on a date. Go do something nice for yourself, and kind of whatever you're doing. Just make sure you're giving yourself a little more grace than you normally would, and treat yourself right. You know.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
Where would Oh, I guess there should be a question there. Where would you take yourself out on a date to?
Okay. um, my question is, how do you make yourself feel important every day? So I don't think I said this earlier when we were talking about, that I understand now if that worthless, I might not feel worthless, but I do feel unimportant. So, and then it made me realize how I asked myself, I was like, well, I feel unimportant probably because I'm not making myself feel important. Like, is that true? And I'm like, what are the things that I do that make me feel important for myself? And I was like, oh my god. I was like, I don't think I do that enough as I should. I should make that like a top priority of my day. How am I validating my own importance? So question to ask you guys, not what external thing makes you feel important. What are you doing for yourself to honor your own importance? Oh, that's the question. What a great conversation, though. I
Yeah,
knew this
this
was
was a
going to
lot
be
of fun. This was definitely one for the books. It was a good one. A lot of
good.
cool questions got asked. A lot of things to kind of ponder on and think about.
Mhm.
And we just want y'all all out there questioning constructs the same way we do. You know, the constructs being our own minds at times, right?
Mhm.
Question those too. Um, don't be overly critical, right?
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, this was awesome. I had a lot of fun.
Yeah. Me too. And we hope you guys, again, learn something from it for yourselves and that it changes the way that you interact with the world, and makes it more interesting.
Yeah, and
Mhm.
when you do ask these questions, just always make sure that you're diving headfirst, face down.
Face down.
Yeah.
Yeah. All
All right,
right. Love you
guys.
guys.
Bye.
Bye.